Good afternoon. I'd like to bring to order the Urban Forestry Board meeting on Monday, August 12th, 2024. Welcome, everybody. Do you want to do roll call, Jackson?
Chair Burt is absent. Vice Chair Kohler,
Here.
Halloran,
Here.
and Board Member McChristian.
Here.
Vice Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. The first item is approval of minutes from the July 8th meeting. Does anybody have any comments? If nobody has any comments, then does somebody want to move to approve?
Sure. I make a motion that we approve the minutes of July 8th, 2024.
I second.
Okay, motion passed. The second item is visitor communication. Do we have any, Jackson?
We do not have any visitors.
Okay. Board business. The first item is consideration of recommendation to remove one approximately 8 to 10 inch DBH aspen at 1044 East Horseback Trail.
So this report was prepared by Arbor One Tree Service, the tree service we use for removing trees. They are certified arborists. They're able to give us some in-person inspections of this. As Dan is remote, and you will see their report attached. The homeowner did bring this tree to our attention, so that is why.
Yeah, I looked over that myself and I thought kind of makes sense to me. I know aspens can cause a lot of challenges in the urban environment, so seems like if they wanted to remove and replant, you guys have any opinions?
So I went and looked at the tree in question and the situation. There's a series of 3 trees there. The road kind of curves around, and the one that's closest to this property. It looks okay, frankly. Not like it's in danger of falling over anytime soon. And it's nice that those trees are there because the road does curve. It kind of points out as you're driving what's happening because there's not a house right behind those trees. The property owner has, I assume it was the property owner, has planted 2 new trees in front of that house. And one is very close to this aspen in question. So the 2 of them at some point would really be competing for airspace. And as they state in the report, then there's a stump of a tree that was cut down along the way by somebody. So, you know, relative to this particular tree, I didn't feel like it was necessary to take it down. It might be the homeowner's preference to take it down, but it's in reasonable health to my eye. And it kind of brought up the question to me, like, do people need to, this question for you, Jackson, do people need to work with the city to plant new trees in front of their house if it's not their private property? And maybe that was done in this case, I don't know.
Not terribly familiar. That's usually a community development related thing that they deal with, but typically you're required to plant right-of-way trees if none exist. So if this property had no trees in that strip between the road and the sidewalk, it typically required, I believe it's like a 35-foot spacing. I could be wrong on that.
At the time the house is built?
Yeah, that'd be good to learn. My initial thought was that trees removed in the right of way might automatically instigate replanting, but maybe I'm wrong there.
I don't believe so, not, I mean, we've had some instances where trees being removed.
If the,
We've had some even being removed illegally,
Mhm.
and, much to my, encouragement, they haven't necessarily been replaced, especially when, someone removes them. We've had some removed by Pine Meadows, so people just didn't like them in front of their house, and they didn't like the leaves on their lawn.
Mhm.
So we had to address that. So I'm not real sure what the case is in this particular one. They probably were street trees put in by the developer, because the developer is required to have so many street trees put in when they do it. That's what they look like. And they typically go with a species that's relatively easy to procure and easy to get in the ground. It looks from the picture that maybe there's been some kind of a evergreen or something planted close. Was that the?
I think it's a maple. Yeah.
Oh,
The
okay.
little sticking up there, yeah.
And you can see roots traveling down along towards the drain that's in there.
Yeah, they do
I
that.
had mixed feelings on it. Without visually inspecting the individual's crawl space to see that there are aspens coming up in it, it almost feels like it's well, I'm not the urban forestry board, I'm the advisor, but, I think that that maybe the compromise is if it's taken down, that somewhat not mature, but a tree of similar value as a street tree that's maybe less susceptible to the borer, and also I know that I've heard Paul say at different times that the aspens do give them trouble.
Mhm.
Replace it, so it's not a case of the tree coming down and nothing replacing it, but there's actually an incentive for the neighbor to have to replace. That might be something you could do, say, well, if the tree is removed, you're responsible for, and so, provide a couple of species that would be appropriate, and perhaps size. In other words, you want to have a tree that's not a sapling, like we
Mhm.
stuck in the park over here. You want to have something that's got some growth and maturity on it, and that they be responsible for seeing that it is irrigated and survives. That could be a compromise. I mean, I don't know, is that beyond the purvey of this group? I don't know. But since this is initiated by the individual, and I, the people who looked at it are the folks we use for the city, so, but at the same point in time, the tree certainly has not started to lose foliage, and it's a good-sized tree. And this one keeps using the plural, so,
Yes, I was questioning, is it more than one tree?
I think they were referring to the one on private property side in that kind of ditch area, which I believe is a HOA common space.
Oh,
Nice. They say in the report, during my visit, I was able to identify 2 aspens in the right of way.
in the right of way, right, not on the private property is what I was.
There's actually 3 in a row, and then one that had been cut down.
Stump. Yeah.
Mhm. And, well, I like your idea, Gary, of asking the person if they're gonna have this tree cut down as they wish, then replace it. Well, they can't really replace it where it was anymore because of the other tree is too close, but in between where this one comes down and the stub that was there,
yep.
further away from their house, somewhere in there, you could plant a tree that would have a little space to grow.
And I suspect the stump, just me, possibly it died, but I suspect that maybe it was blocking somebody's view and went down when nobody was looking.
Mhm.
The stump on site. or-
Yeah, you can see it, there's a picture where you can see a vehicle in the distance, the tree in question, and a stump.
Mhm.
That's, I think, the second image.
That tree was approved by the UMB for removal, I believe, some time ago.
Hmm.
It was, diseased.
Yep.
Okay.
But something could go perhaps in that space in between to maintain the tree canopy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that, again, you're an advisory committee to the council, and I understand that. I think where I am as a counselor in the long term is, as we move forward, I want to see some language come out. We have so many fish to fry. This keeps falling to the back. That when a tree is removed in the right of way, a tree is replaced in the right of way, because that's part of our urban canopy, part of our community. It's my thinking as a counselor. That's another day and another issue, but I don't think it's inappropriate, since it's being asked by the homeowner to be removed because they're worried about it getting into their house. We don't seem to be worried about it, but they seem to be worried about it. So it may be appropriate to ask that, you know, if they're planting some maples, which I think it's the same, I'm trying to read if it's the same address or not. I think it is where the maples went in,
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, something go in there.
You can reach out to the property owner and.
It might
see if
be
they are providing
worthwhile.
Irrigation to that, or if it's the HOA providing irrigation, if it's irrigated.
I can see the old irrigation line there. I suspect that it's not being irrigated. There's actually two pieces of probably 1 inch or 3/4 inch irrigation feeder line going into there. And given as they said that the planting strip is very dead, I suspect there's no irrigation going in there.
It looks pretty dry.
And that's probably provided by the HOA, although the swale doesn't look like it's very irrigated either, and I don't know who owns the swale. If that's a right of way, city right of way?
The swale in the second to last image,
Yes, sir.
that's, HOA common.
It looks like it would be
Got some.
right in between some houses.
I would agree with you, Gary, about the replacement because I see the reason that we require developers to install that is because it's a part of the infrastructure that supports,
Right.
you know, the city. And then it would be something to me that would be more of, if you're not going to replace the tree, you could, that would be where the, you know, you might approve not replacing it, but it would generally be accepted that you would replace the tree.
And I'm thinking in that picture of the swale, are we seeing the maple in the foreground? There's a tree on the swale side of the sidewalk.
No, that's the maple that he planted or she is in the strip next to the street.
Okay,
I mean, maybe that's another maple, but you can clearly see that two trees were planted in front of the house on the strip
Okay.
between the sidewalk and
not
the
having
street.
been, I'm just looking at the swale picture, because there is a aspen in the planting strip behind the tree that's in the swale that has lost some of its foliage.
Yeah, all three of them along there, no, don't look 100%. They all have foliage, but they look like they're thirsty or wind beaten or insects are starting in something. They don't look 100% like they're thriving like some others do there, but they don't look almost dead either.
That swale is a drainage swale. I can see the outflow from that. Great. I have it here. Look,
Yeah,
there's an outflow there.
yeah.
So that's what that is. I was just curious.
I generally think of aspens as being a challenging tree to have in the urban environment, and I can understand where somebody would say, where in this situation, you might look and say, it'd be better to resolve this situation earlier, plant trees that are suitable for the site as soon as possible and let them grow to a good size rather than kind of, we push it out, well, you know, it's not really a problem yet, and then you end up having to remove the tree later and replant anyway.
Yeah, that would make
It
more
might
sense.
be better to,
Yep.
because of the conflicts that can happen with the roots spreading.
Yeah.
The other tree.
From the tree he or
Yep.
she planted to the other one, that gives you a better perspective of it.
Yeah, thank you.
So how should we proceed, Jackson? Do we do a motion?
Or would it be appropriate for you to contact them and get back to this group at the next meeting?
We could table this or defer it to the next meeting.
Get a
And you
little
could
more
contact
information?
them?
Yes.
Okay,
Maybe they intend to replant already. I don't know.
yeah.
Any idea how many other homes in this neighborhood have the same situation? And we're setting a precedence now that won't be limited to just this one property owner. Do we know if the developer put those in?
I talked to the neighbor across the street and the developer put in the trees in front of her place, directly across the street from this,
And those were aspens?
and they were aspens.
So we're talking more than one house potentially that will have this issue or could bring up this issue.
Are those two trees across the street aspens, they look kind of reddish.
Well, it's across the street
Variety, yep.
and a little kitty corner to this house. The street curves there.
Oh, okay, gotcha, yeah.
With that street curves north, you seem to have some of the older, more mature aspens, but once the east-west portion of that, they don't appear to be aspens. I've never looked very close, but they don't stand out as aspens.
So I guess my point is,
Good point.
I wonder if we need to. I know we're just looking at one property, but do we need to think of this as a broader motion for the neighborhood? I don't know. Or we just let the homeowners come to us first and we don't. So I just think as soon as the next homeowner says, oh, what's going on over there? Oh, yeah, the city's taking down the trees, the aspens. Well, I don't want mine either. So is it typical that we just are more reactive to homeowners coming to us? Or do we need to be proactive and saying, these aspens are going to be a problem everywhere in this development?
I think that kind of makes me wonder if are they an approved tree in the development code for tree planting? I don't think they are. Uh, Quaking aspen, maybe Swedish aspen, but not quaking aspen, because my understanding is there's a little bit different issues with the roots spreading. That seems to be where we would deal, in my mind, that would be where you deal with it. Maybe there have been some planted, there are some issues with it, deal with them as they arise, but then generally not really, discouraging the use of these trees.
Yeah,
in the
going
street-
forward.
Going forward, I think a lot of communities do that with aspen. It's a, well understood issue. But they're also really nice trees, and I know that a lot of people want to plant them regardless of the challenges, but maybe in the street strip is not the best place for that because we want, well, I generally think we'd want nice, long-standing trees there that are healthy and causing minimal.
Well, my observation of being on the board is that we have been reacting to somebody who comes forth with a problem unless the problem is drawn to the attention of Dan, or one of us sees something and brings it to the attention of Dan to be looked at. So I'm not aware of any time that the forestry board has proactively thought about a particular HOA
Yeah.
and communicated to that HOA.
Right.
Yeah, we see an issue, a possible future issue with this, and this tree or these trees. And if that happens, then here's what we'd like you to do. So
Yeah.
that's as far as I know.
I don't think the board has ever done anything like that either. I can see that maybe in the case of a disease spreading through the neighborhood rapidly, but in a case of trees that just kind of have a short lifespan and tend to be a minor nuisance.
So if we make a decision here to say to this property owner, yes, you can remove the tree. We would like another tree planted in its space. We have set the precedence that anybody else that comes to us with the same complaint, we would have to, I assume, give them the same answer.
Well, these people are claiming and the report is supporting, although my observation. I'm not 100% convinced, but they're certainly not completely robust trees. So the homeowner in the report is saying that they're suffering damaged trees that are also happen to be invasive. It's far away from their house. By the way, it's an invasive in the strip and it might be invasive in the sidewalk and maybe underground to the swale, but it's far away from any residence.
My understanding, these aspen roots can go pretty far, though.
But
Is,
usually
is
they
that true?
sprout in the process, do they not?
They
I
pop,
mean, I'm just saying,
You know where
I've
they
been to
are.
some of those aspen forests where they cover thousands of acres and genetically it's one tree.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so that is certainly how they propagate. I don't see any aspens popping up in the swale. Doesn't mean anything, but I don't see any in the swale. And that's where there's water occasionally.
I see some here.
Do you? Is that those little
Up
guys
up
are?
next to the rocks there, that's all aspen sprouts, it looks like to me.
Okay, well, you're the guy who knows. They look to me like,
Yeah, here in
Oh,
the
all
corner, you
these
see
little-
there,
Me
you
like
see that
there's no-
retaining wall there, and up along the retaining wall,
Yeah.
I see a lot of aspen sprouts.
I
Yeah.
can recall the homeowner saying they had somebody come in and remove the suckers that were in their yard
Oh,
and assess some of the invading suckers in their property.
so,
Foundation damage was a concern.
so a question for our knowledgeable arborist in
Uh-huh.
the room. I'm just curious, It's got nothing to do with the reports report I'm stepping out. Those sprouts, even if the tree, those are now viable plants. You take the tree down, those sprouts don't stop growing.
I think that's the case, yeah, you might have, I wouldn't speak to it 100%, but I would imagine that, yeah, you could definitely remove those 3 trees, and it's probably pretty likely that it may even encourage those
Those
sprouts.
sprouts to do more.
You'd have to, if you really wanted to get rid of the trees, you'd have to go through a process of, removing the sprouts
Yeah.
continuously for a period of time, I would think, or using chemical means, which I don't necessarily,
I have vegetable boxes in our backyard and I've got aspen sprouts coming up. I mean, the boxes are probably this deep in soil, so they're coming up from underneath and they're finding their way out. And I don't have an aspen within 30 feet of those boxes.
yeah.
I don't know if a previous owner cut one down, but the nearest one is in our front yard. And I've heard that they go pretty darn far. I'm disappointed to hear that cutting down the
Well-
aspen doesn't solve it because it's still, they're popping up everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I don't know how destructive they are, though. Can they really can they really move a foundation? Or they just go around it?
I don't have a lot of firsthand experience with
Yeah.
that. Maybe Dan does.
Dan, what's the damage an aspen roots can do and sprouts?
Okay, for Aspen, if you go to the western part of town, on South Pine in that, HOA area, there are aspens in that neighborhood and they do, conflict with the sidewalk paving and other issues. So yes, to answer your question, roots and exponential growth of aspens, they grow fast. They could do some damage, yes.
I have come across some instances on private property where folks initially came to me and I directed them to the proper location, where they had arborist reports and pictures of the roots causing damages to them.
Oh, okay.
You could have a living tree in your living room.
I know. I wonder where it's going to sprout up next.
Backtracking a little bit, I think there was a question about aspen, if it was a recommended prohibited species. It is neither. It's not on our recommended list or our prohibited list.
Oh,
Another one was, we typically have not required folks to replace trees if there's no suitable location or if there's no irrigation in that area.
Mhm.
So in this instance, if we could verify there was irrigation there that was working, you folks could approve the removal with the condition of a replacement from the city's recommended tree list. That's a typical motion that has come across in the past.
Okay. And that would, responsibility to cut down the tree would be the city's and to replace the tree would be the homeowners?
And to water it.
Good condition. We have had instances when the board has asked that the homeowner bear that responsibility.
Although, if I were the homeowner, I would say, but it's not even in front of my home where you want me to plant this. Because the homeowner is asking for a tree that's adjacent. As far as I can tell from just looking at the situation, my guess is that it's not, his property ends here and this tree is, I don't know, 2-3 feet beyond. Like I said, I'm not sure of the property line, but that's what the appearance is. So, so one option would be we could just say we move to cut down the tree. City does it. And be silent about the tree replacement or recommend that the homeowner work with the city to choose a tree to replace it from the city's recommended list.
That could be a condition of your forward.
Quick question. Do we know which of those two aspens we're talking about? Because there's another aspen right in front of the house at the beginning of the swale that is, looks like it's had a second tree cut off of it. It looked like it was a split tree. You look at the pictures by that truck. That appears to be an aspen as well.
I believe the aspen in question is the one nearest the truck. The one closest to the individual taking the picture is not adjacent to their property.
So that is not the one that they've asked to have be removed. They're asking for the tree in front of the house to be removed by the truck, which is not the one I thought it was.
Yeah, that was confusing me as well. A bit of a vision trick there. So in the very last photo, that is the one being considered.
Okay.
The one closest to the property.
Yes,
Mhm.
that has had a portion of the tree removed
Yes.
earlier.
And then coming towards you, you can see the little stub.
And I can see the little tree they planted next to it. Okay, thank you.
So Avery and Cheryl, do you have an opinion on how to word it?
That last, what did you just say? I'm sorry.
Do you have an opinion on how to word a motion if we want to proceed to a motion?
I just want to be clear really quickly that the City of Sisters holds responsibility for removal and maintenance of all trees in the city right of way, as well as replacement.
I don't know. That's the question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that would be good to clear up before I made a motion. I would want to know that.
Yeah, the property owner could come back and say, why do I have to replace it? It's not my property,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's a right of way.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they're required to maintain a number of trees that right of way.
Okay.
Okay, the property
So
owner.
they do have a responsibility.
Okay.
It feels to me, and I'm going to speak as a counselor, that we don't have all the answers we need, and there needs to be a little more investigation with planning. And also maybe even looking at where we are, because, you know, there is language that says you maintain that planting strip because once the right of way goes in, you maintain the sidewalk, you maintain it up to the street. So I don't, you know, if that was overgrown with cheatgrass, we'd be out there asking them to cut it down, the cheatgrass. So, I don't know what that means for trees, and Dan probably doesn't know, maybe he does, but I think that what it's telling me is that as we've become a more mature city, we have to start looking at some of these things and thinking about how we handle some of our trees that mature, and when it's a citizen-driven complaint versus something like we're gonna see later where we have a dead tree that is really needing to be removed, because there is an expense to us to remove those.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I am. You're welcome to make a motion. It's not a problem for me. I think that, it just feels like you're asking questions without really knowing what the answer is, and maybe we need to dig a little deeper. And I know someone who's really good at that, happens to be sitting behind you. Sorry.
There is some language in the code, stating that is the obligation of the adjacent property owner to replace trees. And that is in line with how the board has ruled in the past.
Okay.
All right, great. That's really helpful.
Except in this case, if the property owner's property ends before where that tree is located, because it's across from a swale, not anybody's house.
That tree is right in, if you were to extend those property lines into the asphalt pavement, it would be immediately adjacent to their property.
Immediately adjacent. And so, like, another question, if it's immediately adjacent, does that rule still hold that?
Yes, so right-of-way maintenance until the backside of curb or edge of pavement, whichever one exists, is the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. Like Gary was saying, if it was overgrown with weeds in the right-of-way adjacent to their house, it is their responsibility.
Okay, so then we can make a motion. City will cut down the tree, you need to replace it. Thanks.
Cool. Well, I would make a motion that we approve the removal of the aspen trees at 1044 East Horseback Trail with the condition that any tree that's removed is replaced.
Are you saying one aspen tree? It's hard for me to understand your.
I was saying any, I don't know how many. Maybe I need to clarify how many do they want to remove? Because if the issue is that the aspens are causing problems with the sidewalk, and it makes sense to me that you would remove them all, but I don't know if that's,
Mm.
they can't do that because it's not their property.
It's the HOA's problem.
That's the HOA's property. Okay, so I make a motion that we approve the removal of one aspen at 1044 East Horseback Trail with the condition that it is replaced in this city right away,
Replaced by the homeowner?
replaced by the homeowner in the city right away.
And cared for or irrigated? I mean, like we said, it looks pretty dry in there. I'll make sure there's water. Can we add that?
Sure, and I'm guessing that's kind of in the code though, right? They're responsible for the maintenance of that tree.
Shall be the continuing duty and routine obligation of the property owner to perform activities required to maintain trees located within the abutting right-of-way in good health and vigor.
Health and vigor. Okay.
So how about this? So I'll try it one more time here. This is good practice for me.
No, I agree.
So I would like to make a motion to approve the removal of an aspen tree at 1044 East Horseback Trail with the condition that it is replaced by another tree that is on the recommended street trees list.
I second.
All in favor?
I.
Aye.
Vice Chair, the motion passes.
Okay.
And let me just add, now that you've done that, and looking at the picture, they planted the tree next to it, they clearly are maintaining the water.
Yeah,
They may be hand watering.
Yes,
Irrigation.
that's what I mean, yeah.
okay. B, discussion of action to be taken on declining 24-inch DBH Ponderosa pine at 1177 East Creekside Court.
It included the original staff report, what Dan first.
Is there any discussion about this?
Like Dan says, it's dead as a doornail. I move for the removal of the Ponderosa 24-inch tree at 1177 East Creekside Court.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Vice Chair, the motion passes.
Okay. Okay, we're moving on to C, consideration of recommendation to remove dead 5-inch DBH poplar at 516 East Tyee Drive.
I did respond to, this when the homeowner, adjacent homeowner had brought it to our attention. It's bone dry. You shake it, it rattles.
Is it under 5 dBH?
It's about 5 inches.
Was our DBH limit 8 inches? This is on private property? No, this is in the right of way. Okay, that's why.
And so it's another one, like, there's really no discussion, it should come down.
Yeah.
Somebody want to make a motion?
I move to remove the popless tree located at 516 East Tai Drive.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I share the motion passes.
Okay. On to other business. A, update on preserved roundabout tree.
So after, it was brought to our attention, I believe Avery, that was you, that there was, some soil building up above the original grade of the tree. Paul had reached out to, project manager with the roundabout, and the very next day they had scraped all that away.
Nice.
So they got as far as they could. They still need some shoulder rock against the path, 'cause it's a little high up there, but they got, as much as they could up from, as much of that out as they could, back to original grade.
Cool. Very cool.
I was impressed how quickly they responded to that. Yeah, I rode my bike the next day and they were already working on it. It was great.
I noticed I can see that tree from right here.
That's great.
It's thanking
You
you.
can keep an eye on it.
Thank you, I can breathe.
Well, that's great news.
Yeah.
I haven't noticed any, change in its condition.
Mhm.
I'm happy to see green on.
Mhm.
Okay. 5B, discussion of the draft Oregon's regional tree list version 4.
Yeah, that's something that I brought to the last meeting and I thought it would be something neat for our group to review if you have time for it. It's definitely optional, but, this is a tree list and narrative for communities that maybe, well, it's for anyone in the state of Oregon, but it's also kind of geared towards communities that need, some background information as they prepare to do urban forestry projects, as they think about planting programs and things like that. And so I thought it'd be kind of neat if folks had time to read through this, kind of play with it, imagine, hey, maybe we want to adopt some of these things for City of Sisters. And make comments. It's open. So I didn't make that clear, but this is a draft publication here, and they're hoping to take comments and feedback from different communities. People can ask, hey, I'd love to see some more information about this. Why didn't you dive into these things? And it can be adapted and adjusted over time. And then hopefully it's a really useful document for people moving forward statewide. And it seemed like a good group to be able to bring this to and say, take some feedback. And so it goes through a bunch of stuff in the beginning, what they're describing as the narrative and different information about tree planting and soils and things you can consider about your community. And then it moves into a tree planting list or an approved tree list. And it's broken down into regions. So there was basically kind of a west of the Cascades, east of the Cascades, and then also a southwest region. And I think eventually that might be narrowed down. That was the goal, but with the time and capacity that the group had, that was what we stuck with. And there's a lot of recommendations for different trees. And if you know of trees that you think do well here that aren't seen on the list, that would be really cool to hear about. And then also it's kind of neat because there's also some considerations in there to as to which trees are climate resilient. So could be useful for us to look into and adopt some of those trees into our recommended tree list if they're not already on there. With the thought being that as things, change environmentally, we want to be thoughtful about what kind of trees we're putting in the ground because these trees could live for hundreds of years. And at that point, maybe they're not in as wet and cool a climate as they were when they were first planted. So thinking about that and hoping that they last into the Future's the thought there. But anyway, yeah, if you have time and you want to take a look at this and add comments, I think it'd be really appreciated, and hopefully it turns into a good, useful tool for other communities and places just like Sisters, I think is where it's kind of designed for, so. Yeah. Anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
So would the idea be that we'd create one for Sisters specifically, or just utilize this one using the East Cascade sections of it?
Yeah, I think that's a way of looking at it. I wouldn't think that really the request is that Sisters create their own, but that this
Okay.
is intended to be a tool for imagine a city like Metolius or Terrebonne, or that doesn't have an arborist or a
Okay.
forestry program, but they come upon, you know, hey, we want to revitalize our downtown and plant some street trees. How do we get started? You know, and people without a ton of resources can look to these things, but I think there's also a lot of useful information, even for communities that do have established programs, to be able to reference as well.
I believe one of the sheets has some of those QR codes that lead you to shared Google Docs where you can make comments and edits.
Oh.
Nice. Thank you, Avery, for sharing this with us.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I think they're keeping it open for comment into October, last I heard. So if you have time, you know, if you think about it or you notice something and, you know.
Okay.
So this is a brand new project, or is this an update of something that's been
No, it's a
around?
new project as far as,
Very cool. Okay.
yeah, so that was it for that.
Okay. So board member comments is the next section. Does anybody have any comments?
I have a brief comment just after today, whether or not we want to follow up, what Gary was talking about of the replacement. I'm curious how that generally goes. So say the city identifies there's a dead tree, we remove it, we don't replace it typically?
That's what I'm understanding. Depending on where it's located relative to a residence.
Well, and I think not having Paul here,
Yeah.
who does sit on these meetings typically, could answer some of those questions. That's where the institutional knowledge lies. But I think what this says to me, this whole discussion, is that as we move forward and we look to expansion of the city, we look to what we may want to put in with roads and stuff, it says we need to have some more clearly defined methods under which we work for these sorts of things, as well as perhaps looking at that list, a list of trees that, because right now it sounds like these are the ones we'd like you to plant, but you can plant anything you want. And I think that means we need to tighten the code up to say, you need to work from the list of trees provided by the city. Otherwise, the developer's going to put in whatever they can get the cheapest that day.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just the way it is.
Mhm.
And I can tell you, having had a whole bunch of those dumb plum trees that, whatever they are in the valley, planted by my
Thundercloud.
distinct when they blossom, and
Mm.
so anyway, they were cheap. So I think that's maybe a recommendation, not now, but maybe something for like a workshop or something with this group. And we have our other members here as well. And Paul, to kind of think about, is this something as we look forward and we look at code changes in some other area that we may want to address? And
Adding that species to the prohibited list.
I think that, yeah, we probably should not allow it. If aspens are going to be problematic and we're going to be taken down after 20 years or 15 years, whatever. And I think Paul has some pretty strong opinions on them as well.
I haven't seen any planted in many of the developments.
Yeah.
Kens Meadows, Woodlands. I haven't seen any.
But I do think if we're going to protect the urban canopy, the urban forest, and part of that is are the street trees. I mean, we clearly have an obligation to the trees within the city. We've had this discussion on city property, but also I think there needs to be some sense of what we're going to do. And that's not going to be today. It's not going to be next week. but it probably is something to start thinking about. And perhaps this group comes forward, working with Jackson and probably Scott and maybe Paul to kind of sit down and say, hey, as we look to what's going to happen in the future, these are the things we want to see from the city's perspective of low maintenance and from the community perspective of having green. This is the time, I think. We can't do much about what's been done, and there's not a lot of building left to do, but we ought to make it clear what we expect. That's what I think. That's the thought that rolls through me, and I'm one of five, and come January, I'll be one of five with 2 or 3 new ones.
Yeah.
So it's, you never know, you know, and there may be some changes, so we need to think about that process.
Yeah, good point. And speaking of the city and workshops, we're still on schedule for the 28th for the heritage tree discussion. So
28th, is there a time on that at this point?
I think the workshops start at 5 or 5:30.
It depends on depends on how much is on the workshop agenda. Typically, they start at 5:30 and go to the start time of the council. But occasionally we have started at 5 when there has been a need for in-depth discussion on things, or we know we're going to have a lot of public input. And it's probably too early really to have the discussion we just had as a part of this.
Mhm.
But it could be an excellent opportunity to say, these are the things we're looking at going forward. And, you know, beyond this, you know, the heritage trees part one, but also we're looking at our street trees and how do we're getting requests to take street trees down that aren't appropriate. So where do we go from here? And we may be back to you later with a proposal related to that. Just as a,
Plant the seed.
and I'll bring it up anyway at the city council meeting that with this a discussion, so.
Okay.
Just want to make sure I heard correctly. August 28th, 5:30 PM likely. There's a meeting about heritage trees at the city council workshop.
Yeah, I haven't seen the agenda yet to know what
Okay.
time it's starting, unfortunately.
It's too soon for an agenda to be
Yeah.
published, but I'd be happy to let you folks know exactly what's on.
You could probably get a sense, because Jordan's gonna know, or, you know, we have people that are gonna know what's.
Roughly is okay. I just want to pencil it. I just think that afternoon I'll kind of make some time maybe. I think I can. I hope.
Up again, yeah. And then update on the Arbor Day 2025 plan. So Cheryl and I met with Emmy today to kick off starting the planning for that. And we had a lot of good ideas. We talked about what happened in 2024 and ideas we have for 2025. So more on that later.
Okay.
We'll be meeting monthly,
Oh, great.
and Arbor Day is April 25th, 2025.
I've recently been working on tree orders and thinking about the best and the recommendations I've got from people around our region is if you want to plant trees in the spring, April, having your order ready by November is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
In that way, so it's something to consider, but that way it's easy to get a hold of what you want.
Right.
If you have that kind of a list that you need, if you know you have a connection with the Project Ponderosa, so maybe that's already taken care of.
Well, they still need to know too,
Oh, okay,
if
gotcha.
we're gonna get more Ponderosas, which is TBD for next year. Yeah.
That's great.
Anything else from anybody? Nope. Dan, are you there? Okay. I'll adjourn the meeting then? Yep. Okay, we're going to adjourn the meeting of the Urban Forestry Board on August 12th at 3:47. Or, sorry, 3:52.